Just over 20 years ago, in Manhattan, New York, one of wrestling's legit dream matches took place. Noah's legend Kenta Kobashi, known for some of the most stunning strong-style matches ever, would face Samoa Joe, young in his career but racking up big matches at the time. There are other great videos about Joe vs Kobashi on this website, so this video is not about that match. What it is about are the matches and appearances that could have happened but didn't. The promotions that Kenta Kobashi could have appeared for, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't on the cards. In this video, we'll look at the US excursion of Kenta Kobashi. We'll look at how the tour came about, including all the promotions he did and nearly worked for. Then we'll look at how he ended up at Ring of Honor, up to the announcement of his match with Samoa Joe. You'll hear all about what was reported at the time by both The Torch and The Observer. You'll also hear from Gabe Sapolsky, the man who put together the Joe vs Kobashi match, in an interview that was recorded years later. Kenta Kobashi was 38 years old and 17 years into his career in 2005. He was very much an active full-timer though, competing in over 100 matches in Noah that year alone. On July 18th, 2005, he had a match that had a lot of people talking, at Noah Destiny against Kensuke Sasaki. The match was so well regarded, it caused CM Punk of all people to rave about it on his LiveJournal page, at the same time chastising everyone who didn't see it as a classic. I promise that's a thing that happened, and I wish Punk kept up his blogging these days. Despite Kobashi's many accomplishments, there was one thing he had not done so far in his career. He had not wrestled a match outside of Japan. He had wrestled for an American company though, sort of. On April 13th, 1990, Kenta wrestled at the Tokyo Dome on a show co-promoted by All Japan, New Japan and the WWF. He and Masanobu Fushi lost a tag team match early on in the card to Tito Santana and Jimmy Snuka, on a night where Hulk Hogan vs Stan Hansen would be the main event. Though Kobashi had wrestled plenty of Americans, from the Rock and Roll Express to Cactus Jack to Vader in his Noah days, he had yet to go there himself. That would be set to change in the summer of 2005. The first mention of Kobashi possibly going to the US is reported in the July 4th Wrestling Observer. It's also claimed that he wouldn't be coming alone. Kobashi, Kenta and Marufuji are coming to the US from September 21st to 24th for a Harley Race scouting camp at Racer School in Eldon, Missouri. They will probably wrestle on a WLW show, and there's talk of them doing a Pro Wrestling Iron show that week in Northern California as a TV taping. In 1999, Harley Race founded World League Wrestling, an NWA territory and wrestling school in Missouri, which is still running today even after Harley's passing, currently run by his son Leland. He would hold an annual training camp that would take place in September. Each year, different representatives from Pro Wrestling Noah would be sent for this camp, and in 2005 it was the turn of Kobashi, Kenta and Marufuji. It seems that Harley had managed to keep good relationships with virtually everyone in the business, as a 2008 article from Slam Wrestling details the camp, promising that representatives from WWE and Noah would be present. The cream of the crop will be invited to participate in a wrestling card at the end of the camp, which will be filmed by both Noah and the WWE, so it's the opportunity to perhaps be seen in front of a worldwide audience. Race noted, a pretty rare opportunity indeed. If you thought, as I did upon hearing it, that WWE being involved sounded strange, here is an article from WWE.com that I found, advertising Harley's training camp, even mentioning Kenta Kobashi as scheduled to be there. WWE's involvement wouldn't end there though. After Kobashi's visit to the US, reports would come out of Japan about a meeting between he and a WWE office employee who was at the Harley Race camp. That WWE employee was at the time their EVP of Talent Relations, John Laurinaitis. While on the surface, a meeting like that might sound strange, the two did have a history together. Ahead of the meeting, Dave Meltzer would point out It could be just for Japanese PR. Kobashi and Johnny Ace were a regular tag team nearly 15 years ago with All Japan, feuding with Dan Crawford and Doug Furness. He later notes that the two likely won't have seen each other in a few years, as Ace stopped going to Japan, possibly when he joined WWE. While the two were together, Johnny Ace would tell Japanese press that they'd love to have Kobashi face their top stars like Angle, Triple H and Undertaker. Though Dave reasoned, or possibly hoped, most likely nothing will transpire, because Noah needs Kobashi, and he's a lifer with the company. In another interesting thought, Ace also told the press he'd like to set up a meeting with Vince McMahon and Mitsuharu Misawa. Despite Johnny Ace putting this out into the universe, I doubt we were going to see Misawa come in at WrestleMania 22 to try and stop the streak, but it probably would have been better than the Mark Henry match. While he was there, Kenta Kobashi would have a match for World League Wrestling, making this, not his Ring of Honor matches that took place later in the week, his actual US debut. He would face Wade Chisholm, a staple of WLW shows, and Harley's champion at the time. Wade was a trainee of Harley Race, and seemed to make WLW his main promotion, though he did go over and wrestle a tour with Noah, and also had a WWE match on Velocity. In a 2011 interview with Missouri Wrestling Revival, Wade claimed that Harley said he had big plans for him, which seemed to be accurate. Wade would win several tag team titles, most notably with another Harley trainee, Trevor Murdoch, and was also a 5-time heavyweight champion for the promotion. While the fans in Eldon, Missouri were unlikely to get a 5-star classic that night, the Observer's report said that fans were giving Kobashi a standing ovation just for the chops. Chisholm didn't do much, but came off good just for taking it. Also on the same card, Kenta would also compete in a tag team match, and earlier in the evening, a young Kenny Omega would wrestle, just a few months before briefly appearing in WWE's developmental territory, Deep South Wrestling. On this night, standing in the ring, Harley would take the opportunity to really show Kobashi the utmost respect. Race, who was nicknamed Mr. Pro Wrestling in Japan, told Japanese reporters that he's giving his nickname to Kobashi because he deserves it. This wasn't all though, as after Kobashi's match, Harley would tell the crowd about the Mr. Pro Wrestling name and then presented Kobashi with one of his old NWA World title belts and declared him the greatest wrestler in the world. So that's the reason why Kobashi was heading to the US to begin with. But let's take a closer look at the other promotions that were in the running to have Kenta appear for them. Pro Wrestling Iron was a school and promotion founded in 2002 in Hayward, California, by two wrestlers very familiar with Pro Wrestling Noah, Michael Modest and Donovan Morgan, and a third owner, Frank Murdoch. Morgan and Modest had begun wrestling as a tag team in Noah in 2001. They and Murdoch started their own gym and company after leaving local rival APW on bad terms. PWI, not that one, had a strong Japanese influence because of the promoters and their ties to Noah. They would feature Noah talent such as Bison Smith, who was their champion for close to 700 days, and were even able to promote a handful of Mitsuharu Misawa's few US matches. Misawa had previously wrestled a few US matches in 1986, when he was portraying the second version of Tiger Mask, so you could say that his 2002 match for Pro Wrestling Iron was his US debut under his own name. Despite a booking with Kobashi on the cards in July, Pro Wrestling Iron would close its doors in September, having their last show a couple of months earlier before Kobashi's tour would happen. Each of the three owners would have their own reasons for this. Modest bought a home in upstate California, which is hours away from Hayward. Morgan, who said he's gotten burned out on wrestling, recently got married and is moving to Florida. Murdoch is getting out of wrestling. Another promotion that was talked about early on was one you might not expect. They are also said to have interest in working a TNA pay-per-view, although at press time no talks have happened with either side. On the surface, a Pro Wrestling Noah talent shouldn't have been able to turn up in TNA, because they at the time had a strong link with New Japan, one that would only get stronger in the coming years. TNA would from time to time bring in big names from New Japan for appearances on their pay-per-views. In October 2005, they would welcome Jushin Liger for a match with Samoa Joe at Bound for Glory. And they would bring in the future ace Hiroshi Tanahashi in January 06 for a match with AJ Styles. Starting in 2006, New Japan would be represented in TNA's World X Cup tournament, with the team of Jushin Liger, Black Tiger 4, Minoru Tanaka and Hiroki Goto being sent that year. A couple of weeks later, in the July 18th Observer, Dave Meltzer provides more detail on the idea of Kobashi appearing for TNA, and the potential challenges. Noah officials have said that TNA can use Kobashi as long as it's in between tours. The hold-up there is political, because TNA is aligning itself with New Japan, and that alliance may prevent the booking. Only this year, in August 2025, Jeff Jarrett himself addressed these reports on his My World podcast. Jeff never actually names Noah or directly addresses the chance to bring Kobashi in, but he says that he wanted TNA to have one promotion that they were working with in Mexico and one in Japan, implying that they were happy enough to just work with New Japan. Dave also noted in The Observer that it seemed at the time like the political issues could have been avoided, however, and that would have been through the olive branch of professional wrestling, Harley Race, who was said to be on good terms with both Noah and TNA, having had a history with both, as well as Harley's links with Noah and WWE through his training camps. His good relationship with TNA might well have come through them both being an NWA affiliate at the time. On June 19, 2002, Harley would appear on TNA's first ever event, in the very first segment, as part of a parade of NWA legends that would be brought to the ring. In fact, Harley is one of the very first faces seen on that broadcast, and is given the task of making the NWA World title feel important before it was put on the line in the main event. There is just one question left to answer. How did Ring of Honor come to be involved? According to Ring of Honor's booker at the time, Gabe Sapolsky, he made a phone call, apparently at this very desk, to Harley Race upon hearing that Kobashi would be in the country.
Basically, I had read online that Kobashi was going over to Harley Race's school to do a camp. Because Noah would, I think, send guys over about once a year to kind of do like a tryout camp at Harley Race's school. So I just figured if he's coming over here, what's the harm in calling Harley Race and seeing if we can get a match with him? I contacted Mr. Race about it.
Gabe says that Harley was initially surprised about the request, not expecting anyone to want to book him, perhaps not knowing how aware American fans were of Kobashi's work.
At first, he was actually surprised that anybody wanted to book Kobashi outside of his thing in the St. Louis area or Kansas City, wherever he's located.
A few weeks later, after the announcement of Kobashi going to ROH had been made, The Observer mentions that there were also attempts to get him booked on the October 7th and 8th for FIP in Florida, with Full Impact Pro being Ring of Honor's sister promotion of sorts. These bookings are never mentioned in any reporting again, and they might have fallen through due to scheduling. On the date of one of the FIP shows, Kobashi wrestled for Noah in Hurricane Hall. Another thing that Gabe mentioned is that booking Kobashi, quote, wasn't cheap, so I imagine that extending his US trip by a few weeks would have been very expensive for FIP.
I think he saw an opportunity to make some money out of it because the whole thing wasn't cheap, I will say that.
If you're curious, Full Impact Pro did have a guest of honor that weekend. A very different one, as Sean Waltman would wrestle in the main event against Jimmy Rave, which I bet had a ton less chops than Kobashi vs. Rave would have had. Now that I've covered all of the promotions who were potentially involved, let's look at the timeline leading up to Kenta Kobashi's Ring of Honor matches. On July 8th, ROH will present Sign of Dishonor from Lake Grove, New York. Not exactly close to where Kobashi's matches would take place, which might be important in a bit. It was also the company's first ever event in the Long Island area. This show would actually take place one after Death Before Dishonor 3, where CM Punk would surprisingly win the ROH title, when it was known that he was WWE bound. The name of the show comes from the opening segment, where Punk would come to the ring uncharacteristically wearing a suit and would sign his WWE contract on the Ring of Honor World title belt. It was later on this night when the official announcement was made that Kenta Kobashi would be coming to Ring of Honor. Unfortunately for the company though, according to the coverage in both The Torch and The Observer, this wouldn't necessarily get the reaction that Gabe had hoped for. The announcement didn't get a huge pop from the fans in attendance, but his appearance is likely to draw a new group of veteran fans who maybe otherwise wouldn't attend a live ROH event or purchase an ROH tape. It's a marketing strategy ROH often uses, where they bring in a known draw among a core group of fans, hoping to hook them on the rest of the product in the process. Gabe had actually used this strategy with the very show the announcement was being made on, as Long Island local Mick Foley would appear, getting involved in CM Punk's storyline. You could conceivably guess that there may have been more casual fans than normal in, especially for the promotion's first time in the area. Supported by the following show on the night after. The reaction was huge the next night in Manhattan for the same announcement. Right now, Kobashi is only booked on October 1st, but they are working on a second date for him. In The Observer, Dave Meltzer would write that the entire show, not just the Kobashi reveal, would suffer from a lower than expected crowd reaction. The Lake Grove show was said to be a disappointment as far as crowd heat, but the crowd of 750 was really strong, and it was attributed to doing a lot of angle stuff for casual fans who didn't know the storylines and weren't internet fans, which explains the totally different Kobashi reactions. The next time there would be any new developments on Kobashi would be a couple of weeks later at their next show in Philadelphia. On this night, it would be announced that the second date that ROH had been trying to add had been finalised, and so he would also be wrestling on October 2nd. This announcement would lead to some questionable booking, and some even more questionable reasoning from Gabe that were printed in the August 1st Observer. From the National Guard Armory in Philadelphia, the company would present The Homecoming, where in the main event for the ROH World title, CM Punk would go to a 60-minute draw with Christopher Daniels, because we all know how much wrestling fans love a time limit draw. Besides this, many fans were left unhappy with the sheer number of heel wins on the night. Gabe, it seems, felt he could get away with this just the once for a very special reason. Kenta Kobashi was now booked for the next show in Philadelphia. Gabe Sapolsky felt they needed the screwjobs to get some heels over, and felt Philadelphia was an okay place to do it because Kenta Kobashi is on the next show, so he figured everyone would come back. While it's generally not considered good booking practice to annoy your fans knowing they'll come back anyway, at least he did this for just the one show, and not, let's say, for about 10 years. As we got into August, Gabe was openly considering potential opponents for Kobashi. While Samoa Joe was the choice of many, Gabe also seemed to be considering Low-Ki for the second match, but this wasn't going to come without some difficulties. There were some merits to picking Low-Ki. There would be no issues as to a finish, since both work for Noah, and Low-Ki isn't going to refuse a job for Kobashi. While the two had met in 3 separate tag team matches in the same year, a singles match between the two would have been more difficult to book, because of the size difference making it hard to work a match, in the sense that they can work together, but in Noah, Kobashi is a legend, and Low-Ki is just a junior heavyweight undercard guy, so how much can he give him? In a tag they can work it better, with the idea of a heavyweight and a junior heavyweight on each team. Possibly less so today than back then, given how many wrestlers we see move up into the heavyweight ranks. There was a perception between the two divisions that a heavyweight would fare better against a junior. Therefore, it might make the match less appealing or competitive. Because of this, and other issues around the idea of Kobashi losing, Dave calls a tag match with Joe possibly involved an easier political deal. Gabe also explains that having Kobashi work 2 singles matches with high expectations on them would also have been a mistake. Ultimately, the idea of a Kenta vs Low-Ki singles match would be nixed, and a tag team match was considered the better option. From the time of the initial announcement, there was already a lot of talk about who Kobashi's opponent would be when he arrived in New York. Even at this point, there is a push for Kobashi's opponent to be Samoa Joe. More opponents were discussed, but Joe was the one person that everyone seemed to come back to.
Once we had him booked, I mean, the obvious match was against Samoa Joe. That didn't take any booking genius or anything like that. That was just clearly the obvious match to do with him, and the best possible match if you're going to have someone like Kobashi come in.
Not a lot would come out officially though, and Gabe said years later that this was because the deal came extremely close to falling through several times.
And the deal actually fell apart, and I'm not going to get into details, but it actually did fall apart right when we announced it, and that's a story I'll save for my memoirs or whatever sometime. But yeah, the match came very close to not happening, and then it came close to happening, and then it came extremely close to not happening.
On August 29, 2005, Kenta Kobashi's matches for Ring of Honor would finally be announced. On October 1st in New York, he would face Samoa Joe, and on the next night in Philadelphia, he would team up with Homicide against Samoa Joe and Low-Ki. We'll get back to the tag match in a minute, because there's a lot going on there with that announcement. But the singles match with Joe was considered something of a dream match. By mid-2005, Samoa Joe was just 6 years into his career and 26 years old. Despite this, he was already something of a legend to ROH fans, having already held the Ring of Honor Championship for 19 months, an unbroken record to this day. Much like Kenta Kobashi, he too was racking up classic matches, only his list was far shorter, so far. While already respected by ROH fans, by mid-2005, he was also just starting to make a name for himself in TNA. On June 19th at Slammiversary, Joe made a very impressive debut, beginning a 17-month undefeated streak that would eventually end when Kurt Angle arrived in the promotion. At the same time, much like Kobashi, Joe had been racking up highly regarded matches, even some that are still talked about today. On September 11th, 2005, he would be 1/3 of a famous triple threat match at Unbreakable against AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels. For 18 years, this would be the only 5-star match that TNA ever promoted until Bound for Glory in 2023. Despite the 11-year experience difference, Joe and Kobashi were both collecting 5-star match ratings. Now I promise you star ratings don't normally get any attention on this channel, but just bear with me for 1 minute. Between the years of 2003 to 2006, Dave Meltzer awarded 5-star ratings, and every one of those matches included either Samoa Joe or Kenta Kobashi. By the time of their match in October 2005, Kobashi had previously earned 17 5-stars, while Samoa Joe had just 2. Very soon, they would both have 1 more. Odds are, if you're watching this channel, you know all about the classic match that would take place in the Grand Ballroom of the New Yorker Hotel. You've likely even seen it for yourself, from Kobashi breaking his usually stoic demeanor at the sound of the fans cheering loudly for him, to Joe's chest ending up looking like something out of a horror film. What if Kobashi had done more in the US though? What if he had appeared for TNA? If he looked like a fish out of water in Ring of Honor, imagine what he would have looked like in the Impact Zone. What if he'd gone on a tour of the Indies, facing Spirit Squad members and other freshly ex-WWE talents of the time? While it's an interesting thing to think about, it's likely for the best that the Ring of Honor matches stand out, that the US matches of Kobashi had remained few and special. Still, I wouldn't have minded seeing a really weird match somewhere though. Thank you for watching yet another wrestling channel. If you enjoyed this, please comment, like or subscribe.